Okay, good morning and welcome to the May 21st, 2020 meeting of the New York City Campaign Finance Board. Hang on just one second because I just lost my agenda. The first item of business is the approval of the minutes from our last meeting, which is not showing up, but I think it was the April 16th meeting. Just give me a second to get back in here. Sorry, I just lost my my agenda here. Let me just pull it back up. Okay, here we go. I move we approve the minutes of the April 16th, 2020 meeting. Is there a second?
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Abstentions? The motion carries. The next item of the agenda is my report. Again, welcome to our public meeting for the month of May 2020. We hope that everyone in attendance is staying healthy. As you can see, the board and CFB staff continue to work remotely. However, these circumstances have not prevented the board from fulfilling its role in ensuring fair and competitive elections, providing public disclosure of campaign financial activity, and enforcing local campaign finance laws. Most pressing is the primary elections that will be held next month. New Yorkers should know that there will be primaries held in nearly every neighborhood in the city. Eligible voters should request absentee ballots for the primary elections as soon as possible. Voter Assistance Advisory Committee Chair Naomi Zouderer will have more to share on this in a few moments. Tomorrow marks a disclosure deadline for candidates in the primary elections for Queens Borough President and City Council District 37. We will receive updated information about their fundraising and spending by close of business tomorrow, and we'll publish those updates on the board's website. We're also continuing to prepare for a busy election year in 2021 when all city offices will be on the ballot. Interest in running for office in 2021 remains high. Even working remotely, 13 candidates have registered 2021 campaigns with the board since mid-March, bringing the total number of registered candidates to 176 as of this past week. Our candidate services staff continues to provide virtual onboarding training sessions to help candidates get their campaign started. Staff have held 10 virtual training sessions since mid-March, helping 130 potential candidates, treasurers, or campaign workers get ready to run. There are 5 more training sessions scheduled throughout the month of May. Now I'll turn to Naomi Zouderer for her report.
Thank you, Chair Schaefer. As you remarked, we are about 4 weeks away from holding a primary election in the midst of the ongoing coronavirus pandemic. The governor has taken measures to allow all registered voters to request an absentee ballot and vote by mail next month. To request an absentee ballot, the New York City Board of Elections has created a new website, nycabsentee.com, to allow New Yorkers to request a ballot online. The deadline to request an absentee ballot is June 16th. As always, the NYC Votes voter guide will be available to voters in early June. We will all be watching and learning from this first attempt to expand mail-in voting in New York. We expect that mail-in voting will be necessary in November as well. However, this requires further action from state leaders, so we're hopeful that will be coming soon. While we continue to obey social distancing measures, I'm happy to report that government agencies and non-governmental organizations are working more closely together than ever to synchronize our communications around elections and voting during this crisis. Representatives from governmental agencies, including the CFB, Democracy NYC, and the Mayor's Office of Civic Engagement, along with organizations like Dominicanos USA, Citizens Union, Generation Citizen, League of Women Voters, and Who's on the Ballot, among others, have been convening on a weekly basis to share what we are all working on and to foster more coordination. Last week, this group produced a frequently asked questions document addressing the most common concerns we've heard from voters and published this information across multiple websites. The FAQs will be updated as circumstances change to provide New Yorkers with the latest, most accurate, nonpartisan information about how to participate safely in the June 23rd elections. In late April, the CFB published its annual voter analysis report, including a review of New York City's voting patterns in 2019 and recommendations for improving elections in the future. This was the first voter analysis report to include more robust data analysis, including a comprehensive look at New York City's voting patterns over the last decade, and brand new voter participation scores that enables the board to better compare voter participation based on demographics and geographics. The report is available for public consumption on the CFB website's news and media section. And last but not least, as part of the board's efforts to increase participation and civic engagement among young New Yorkers, we've recently launched the We Power NYC Ambassadors Program. This is a new peer-to-peer engagement program that enables young New Yorkers to engage their fellow classmates and get them ready to vote. The program is a direct result of a youth-focused public hearing the Voter Assistance Advisory Committee held late last year, when dozens of young people came to testify about what the city could do to increase participation among young voters. The NYC Votes partnerships and outreach team selected 20 ambassadors to participate in the inaugural year of this program. You can learn more about this program and the outspoken young voting advocates who will be leading this work in the coming weeks and months. And now I turn it over to Executive Director Amy Loprest for her report. You are muted, Amy.
I apologize. So thank you very much. As the chair mentioned, the staff continue to work remotely, and the process is moving along remarkably smoothly, as evidenced by the fact that we will have a disclosure filing this Friday, and all the work that's being done by the voting consortium, as mentioned by our VAC chair. I am also pleased to announce that we'll be releasing on Tuesday a new feature of our NYC Votes Contribute platform. The new feature is a fundraising events. It will allow campaigns to create distinct contribution pages for each fundraiser that they have. Now, as more and more fundraising is moving online, this feature will streamline the process for candidates keeping track of their fundraising and reporting of those contributions. So was a well looked forward function, and it'll be released on Tuesday. Finally, we sent to the mayor and the city council a revised request for our fiscal year 2021 budget. As is required in the charter, we sent our budget request on March 10th that the mayor was to include in his executive budget. After the coronavirus pandemic, we went through our budget and made some revisions and significantly reduced the budget that we are requesting for next year in reflecting the city's current financial crisis. That is all I have. So thank you.
Thank you, Amy. The next item on our agenda is the announcement of campaigns and compliance. The following candidate from the 2017 elections has completed the post-election audit process without any violations and penalties assessed by the Campaign Finance Board. The board recognizes the diligence of the candidate and his campaign staff in running a campaign that maintained compliance with New York City's campaign finance law. The candidate, who is Michael Belzer, running for the City Council District number 18, was a first-time candidate. The next item in our agenda are appearances by candidates. We have two candidates who are scheduled to appear before us this morning. The first is Josue Perez. Is Mr. Perez on this line?
Yes, I'm here. Good morning.
Okay.
Everyone.
Good morning. Is the CFB staff on the line for this matter?
Yes, I'm here, Chair Schaefer.
Who is that, Joe?
Oh, Joe Gallagher, yes.
Yeah, there you are, Joe. Okay, I didn't see you at first. All right, so Mr. Perez, let me just briefly explain how this is going to work. Mr. Gallagher is going to do a very short presentation of what the issues before us are. I'll then ask for your presentation, and you can say what you have to say. There may be some questions from members of the board. There may be some response from the CFB staff. And then when everybody's had their say, we'll move on to the next appearance. After the two candidates have appeared and there's been this conversation, the board will go into deliberations, and then when we come back, we'll announce our decision. Okay? So, Mr. Gallagher, why don't you begin?
Thank you. Good morning, Chair Schaefer and members of the board, Executive Director Loprest and Mr. Perez. And thank you, Mr. Perez, for agreeing to appear remotely with us today. I'm Joseph Gallagher, Senior Associate Counsel for the CFB, and I have here today Celia Liang, a Senior Auditor at the CFB. Before the board this morning is the matter of the Jose Perez campaign in the 2017 primary election for City Council District 10. The campaign was a participant in the program and received public funds. CFB staff recommends that the board find the campaign committed the following 3 violations of the Act and board rules: failing to demonstrate compliance with cash receipts reporting and documentation requirements, maintaining a petty cash fund over $500, and failing to document transactions. CFB staff recommends that the board find the campaign has a repayment obligation representing the campaign's qualified expenditure deficit. The campaign contests one of these violations and the repayment obligation.
Thank you. Okay, now that the issues have been sort of defined for us, Mr. Perez, it's your opportunity to speak.
Good morning, everyone, and thank you for letting me participate in this meeting. As Ms. Gallagher explained already, I was fined penalties and a couple of issues. Our campaign was a new campaign, grow bigger than we expected, way bigger. We tried to do everything at the best of our knowledge. There was a very few mistakes that we learned by experience. And hopefully, now that we're running again, those mistakes were not going to happen. Now, one of the issues of the penalty that I'm contesting, like the campaign finance officer mentioned, is the post expenditure for 9/11. Now, the campaign doesn't feel they're responsible for those expenditure because 2 reasons. One, there were some fees from the banks that were after the election on September 11th. However, the transactions for those fees were before the elections. So that was not under the control of the campaign to know what's going to happen. So the fees came later after the primary, but the transactions for those fees were earlier. So there are several of those fees, $36 fees, the report at the bottom, that the campaign should not be responsible for because that's not in the campaign hands. Also, there's 2, under the same pattern, there were 2 transactions that the campaign would like to get qualified for, which is the, let me get to my points. The Lone Marlin, which is transaction ID 1639, which is now being qualified also because it was NQ post, which means after the primary. However, remember that most of the staff is get volunteer and pay volunteer during election days. So the campaign paid that worker, but the worker took a couple of days to cash the check. So it wasn't the campaign's, again, once again, with the, it's a new campaign. Now that I know that we're running again 2021, we're gonna reinforce that, try to make sure that every employee that is hired by the campaign try to cash that check as soon as possible. But it's not on the campaign control that if you issue a check, you could take a couple of days to catch it. And the same thing happened with los taxistas en acción be like the 1641, we have the same issues, which the check was presented to them, but they catch it after the primary. So the check was done before the primary, but just it was an issue that the payee did not catch it on time. So we'll hopefully believe that the campaign to reduce the amount of penalty that we have to pay could be qualified for that. So those expenditures that were qualified as post-campaign, it was not on the campaign mistake or the campaign sign. There were also like 3 more expenditure that the campaign would like to. And again, thank you for the campaign finance to be so patient and giving me the time to reply to those few mistakes, and we'll do the best we can again. But that's something that we could believe we could get qualified as well. And I'm going to go very quickly on it, not take too much of your time. The first one is United Production, transaction ID 1551, which is ID, marked as ID, was a name. The name didn't match, but the campaign changed those names on the CSMAR. It was a matter of the S. I understand that, but it's very tricky in campaign. We learned about mistake that any little thing could cause us, but it just say United Production, and on the CSMAR it say United Productions. So they have an extra S, but that was fixed. That will allow us to have those $250 back to see who could reduce the amount of payment that we could make. Now, the next 2 items are 1209 and 1373 with Lino Press. They're $217.75 each. And it says that the other, but if you see the reporting exhibit number 2, the campaign provide copy of the literature that was issued. And also, we apologize for the inconvenience too. There was one, I submitted the invoice, which is for $434.50, but we pay in 2 different payments. So it was registered on CSMAR at 2 transactions or 2 payments, but it was actually 1 bill. Now that we know that, we're going to try to make sure that we don't do that again. We don't split the payments. We're going to get everything completed in these elections. Once again, it's marked for $217.75. I provided the documentation and I provided the invoice, which is for $434, which is the same invoice for both transactions. The other one is Paulina Rogelina, which is transaction 1682, which is says ETS, which means we need to provide a proof of work for that employee, and the campaign provided a letter signed by both parties presenting where the employee, that's one of the hardest things to find those employees to sign those letters after the campaign is over, track them down. So we did our best, and it was, we asked first if that was sufficient, and they tell us yes, and we did that. We got a letter for the employees saying how much they got paid and what it was the duties that they performed for the campaign. So we provide those in Exhibit 2. You could see that, a letter from that employee, Paulina Rogelina. So it's marked as ETS, so we did that. We provided the letter that proved that. And basically that's what we like to have changed. The other penalty, we're not requesting it. They were very mistake, I'm not gonna go over. They were very, very minimal mistake. No one learned it. And hopefully in this campaign, we're not gonna make those mistakes again. Thank you for letting me participate.
Sure, thank you. If I can just speak to a couple of the things.
Yes.
So the NQ post, the not qualified for post impermissible expenditures, the campaign did have an opportunity to provide updated timesheets showing the dates that the work was performed. That frequently happens with a campaign where the workers will be paid past the election, but then provide timesheets showing that all the work was performed during the election. But Mr. Perez speaks to another issue, which is a lot of the campaign workers, and you'll see it in the petty cash fund, were paid using cash, which automatic $100 and less. So they didn't make cash expenditures greater than 100, but their petty cash fund was greater than 500 as they were dispersing those funds. And frequently campaign workers in these small campaigns could be unbanked or undocumented. So cash payments are one way to make sure the candidates get paid, but they can never be qualified. So that does create a large $3,500 of cash expenditures that were paid to campaign workers that can't be qualified. And in terms of the Lino Press, I believe there was duplicate invoices for the, so I have to look into Mr. Perez's assertion that it was one invoice and it was paid out in 3 different checks of $17.75 each. It could have been duplicate reporting. But then a larger issue that I brought up in the board memo is the payments that the candidate made to Solid Alliance. I think that was for printing. Is that right, Mr. Perez?
Yes, for printing.
And so those were paid by the campaign committee. The campaign committee had insufficient funds, so those checks were returned, and Mr. Perez, in a good faith effort to pay the vendor, paid those out of his personal funds, which means they are not campaign expenditures at all, but rather expenditures made by the candidate that should have been reported as either an in-kind contribution or an outstanding liability. So those, those are, it's a really tricky issue because they were used by the campaign for printing, but they were paid by the candidate. But those are a large, they total more than the candidate's qualified expenditure deficit.
So let me, can I interrupt? Let me ask a question about that. So if he had just, to use a fancy legal term, stiffed the vendor and not paid him, and so the vendor would have been an outstanding liability, would there be an obligation to repay?
There would be an obligation to repay if the candidate received a payment of public funds post-election. So he would have reported those outstanding liabilities as such. And if we were then to give a post-election public fund payment, he would have to use those funds to pay those vendors. But if he didn't have a payment obligation, if he didn't have a payment opportunity post-election, they would still remain outstanding liabilities. Yeah.
He would not have to pay back.
Unless, the vendor could try to recoup the money from the campaign.
And if he had donated the money to the campaign and the campaign had just paid it, that would have been okay.
Then those expenditures would have been qualified, yes.
So it does seem a little bit form over substances to this.
A little bit, yeah. And this one, there's such extraordinary circumstances because the campaign, not extraordinary, but the campaign didn't have any more committee funds to spend. So we wouldn't be qualifying those expenditures because they're not expenditures of the committee. So we would be finding, it would be basically just crediting some qualified expenditures to the campaign.
If he had just done the same thing a slightly different way, the committee wouldn't have the obligation.
Right, but there is a possibility in the future that because the documentation requirements for in-kind contributions are so less stringent than for committee expenditures, that it could see a campaign deciding to make expenditures from personal funds, but paying the campaign committee a donation in that amount to qualify them. Do you know what I mean? It's tricky.
That isn't an issue here, but you're worried about the future. Okay, I have no more questions.
Can I just ask just to clarify something that's Mr. Gallagher, the campaign discussed the impermissible post-election expenditures, and it is my understanding that violation was cleared up based on his response to in previous responses. So I just wanted to make that clear that there is actually currently no recommendation for a violation or penalty for post-election, impermissible post-election expenditures. I just wanted to be clear for Mr. Perez's
benefit. True. The only way that it does affect is it affects their QED, because some of those, although they're not being penalized, they are still not qualified because there wasn't sufficient documentation to qualify them.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
But the impermissible post is gone. That's true.
Yeah.
All right, Mr. Perez, anything further you'd like to add?
Oh, yes, basically I understand the mistake that Mr. Gallagher was pointing out. Some of those mistakes that he says, like paying in, that's one of the penalty because we didn't report on time those documentations. But for those post-qualified, as well as those are requesting the qualifying purchase, because we did provide the time sheets for those employee on the first draft. So all they needed was a letter. So they have those timesheets before. And again, the documentation for those bank fee is just the statement from the bank. There's nothing else. And we provide that as well. So those QP post-election, we provided the documentation. And that's why we would like to get qualified for it, as well as those other timesheets for those workers that I presented. We made a mistake of paying cash. Again, we didn't know that, like you say. So employees, that was the only way. They don't have, they're basically, a lot of people don't use bank anymore or check accounts, and especially in our district, Washington High and Linwood. And we didn't know that. We apologize for the inconvenience. It's not going to happen again. But those employees, they have the timesheet record and they have the letter that they signed, affirmation letter that they did work for the campaign, and where everything was done to the best of their knowledge, and it was even done by the book. Thank you.
All right, if there are no further questions from members of the board, I think we're finished with this appearance. Thank you very much, Mr. Perez. The next candidate scheduled to appear is Antonio Reynoso. Is Mr. Reynoso available on the line? Amy, do you know whether he's present?
Um,
I'm here now. Hello?
oh, okay. Yes. Okay. There he is.
Hello. Good morning.
Good morning. Okay.
Good morning, and thank you for appearing. And we need, who is our staff person who's going to appear, Amy?
Jason Yee.
Okay, just give us a moment, Mr. Ernesto, to
Yeah, no problem.
get up and
Jason
running.
is he? I know that he's here, so because I was just chatting with him. So.
Yes. Good morning.
Okay.
Me?
Good morning, Jason. So, Mr. Reynoso, the way we work is very simple. The staff from the CFB will briefly describe what the issue is. You'll have an opportunity to make your presentation. There may be some questions from members of the board. There may be some response from the CFB staff. And then after we've gone back and forth a few times, we'll finish and go into deliberations, and then after our deliberations, we'll announce our decision. So we'll start with Mr. Yee. You want to give us a short summary of what the issues are?
Sure. Thank you. Good morning, Chair Schaefer, Executive Director Loprest, members of the board, and Mr. Reynoso. Thank you for joining us today, Mr. Reynoso. My name is Jason Yee. I'm an associate counsel for the CFB, and with us today off camera is Senior Auditor Victoria Telt. Before the board is the matter of the Antonio Reynoso campaign in the 2017 elections for City Council District 34. Mr. Reynoso was a participant in the program and received $96,133 in public funds. CFB staff recommends that the board find that the campaign committed violations of the Campaign Finance Act and board rules as follows, and assess penalties according to the penalty guidelines. Failing to disclose a merchant account, failing to provide merchant account statements, failing to demonstrate compliance with cash receipts reporting and documentation requirements, failing to report transactions in daily pre-election disclosure statements, accepting over-the-limit contributions, accepting contributions from corporations and limited liability companies, accepting contributions from unregistered political committees, failing to demonstrate that spending was in furtherance of the campaign, and making impermissible post-election expenditures. The campaign contests in part the recommended violations and penalties. Thank you.
Okay, Mr. Reynoso, the ball's in your court.
All right, first, I just want to thank the CFB for allowing me to be here today. I especially want to thank Jason Yee, who's been absolutely amazing through this entire process, extremely patient, cooperative, and just helping me throughout this entire process. So, Jason, it's nice to see you on camera. Thank you so much for everything you've done for me up to this point. I just hearing all the violations, it makes it sound terrible. But I do want to say I only want to contest one portion of what was presented here by Mr. Yee, and it's the paying back the money, over the limit contributions. And I believe that I was asked to write a check to the campaign finance board or to for $945, and that would have relieved me of the I believe and I don't have it right in front of me, but over $2,000 fine. My treasurer said that they wrote the check and sent it, and my treasurer has not been with me for over 3 years, and he's away, I think, in another country. So I've been doing most of this work on my own. So I also wasn't a primary signer of the bank. So when I went to the bank to try to get on and get access so I can see if the check was written, I couldn't necessarily get access to it without his authority. And because of the lack of communication or contact, that was very difficult for me to do. But the only thing that I would request is that outside of everything else we presented, and Mr. Yee can be a witness to the fact that we've tried our best to respond to as many of these as possible and as truthfully as possible. So I guess what I'm going to be asking is sort of an honor system here. We've never presented something to the CFB that we didn't think was truthful or honest, and by law it has to be. The only thing that I want to request is that if my treasurer and I have signed that we sent the $945 check, we're hoping that because we signed that under perjury of law, under law, should that not be the case, it could be criminal charges, I guess. I just want to, I guess, use our word at this point. But outside of that, I'm willing to accept all the other fees and fines that have been presented by the CFB and by Mr. Yee. And thank you again for allowing me to be here.
Okay, very good. Anything further from you, Mr. Yee?
No, I think we can rest on the memo as presented to the board. I suppose I would like to assure Mr. Reynoso that we don't handle criminal charges with respect to that particular issue.
Okay.
So
I guess we signed a disclosure. We signed a disclosure, Mr. Yee, right? We signed a disclosure to make sure that everything is truthful by law. That's, I guess, what I'm saying. That in itself is I guess I'm stating a matter of fact and not lying, I guess.
So is it the case that nobody has the bank account statement for the relevant time period?
Yeah, I have the bank account statements up to, I think, the end of 2017, but the check that was written would have been written recently or after 2017, and I don't have access to anything, I think, past that. So yeah, I can't get access to the bank. So there's no way I can prove that we gave the $945 outside of the treasurer saying that he did. So yeah, so this is a tough one across the board, but I trust that it's something we did. And I've talked to my campaign manager, who also said that it was written. And then the only way that I think we can prove it is if it gets cashed, and whoever the recipient is can state whether or not it's been received. And I don't know how to track, the end goal here, the group that's supposed to cash it, I guess.
All right. If there are no further questions by members of the board, thank you, Mr. Reynoso, for appearing. And at this time, I think we'll take a break and the board will go into deliberations. Thank you all very much.
Thank you all. Take care.
Thank you.
The board has returned. It would be helpful if each board member announced himself so we can make sure that all 5 board members are on in the meeting.
Rich Davis.
Rick Schaefer.
Greg Camp.
Mary Ann Spraggins.
Okay, so we're just missing Ms. Zatterer.
Can you hear me?
Okay, thank you. Okay.
All right, so the board has engaged in deliberations, and we are, I'll do this all in one motion. We're proposing to make the following findings of violations and proposed penalties and repayment obligations with respect to the 4 candidates before us today, 2 of whom have appeared and 2 have not. And I'll just go through them in order. The first is Maria Castro, a candidate in 2017 for City Council District number 4. The following are the alleged violations and recommended penalties. Oh, I can't see this all now. Good. Okay. 1, failing to disclose a merchant account, $50. 2, failing to provide bank and merchant account statements, $338. 3, failing to report transactions, $51. 4, failing to document transactions, $180. 5, failing to demonstrate compliance with cash receipts reporting and documentation requirements, $405. 6, failing to demonstrate compliance with reporting requirements for receipts, $225. 7, failing to file and late filing of disclosure statements, $1,376. 8, accepting contributions from corporations, limited liability companies, or partnerships, $372. 9, accepting contributions from unregistered political committees, $676. 10, failing to demonstrate that spending was in furtherance of the campaign, $458. 11, failing to respond to the initial documentation request and the draft audit report, $1,000. 12, material misrepresentation, $10,000. For total penalties of $15,100. Next, Bill de Blasio, candidate for mayor of 2017.
Could you just read the total for Castro again, because you froze up a second just for the recording?
Yes, certainly. Total penalties of $15,131. Next, Bill de Blasio, candidate for 2017, candidate for mayor. The following proposed findings and penalties. 1, failing to report transactions, violation, no penalty. 2, failing to demonstrate compliance with cash receipts reporting and documentation requirements, $333. 3, failing to report transactions and daily pre-election disclosure statements, $500. 4, accepting over-the-limit contributions, $10,398. 5, failing to demonstrate compliance with intermediary reporting and documentation requirements, $300. 6, failing to document transactions, $1,100. 7, accepting contributions from corporations, limited liability companies, or partnerships, $1,500. 8, failing to demonstrate that spending was in furtherance of the campaign, $1,678. 9, making impermissible post-election expenditures, $273, for total penalties of $16,082. Next, Josue Perez, 2017 candidate for City Council District Number 10. 1, failing to demonstrate compliance with cash receipts, reporting, and documentation requirements, $315. 2, maintaining a petty cash fund greater than $500, $350. 3, failing to document transaction, $150 for a total penalties of $815 and no public funds repayment. Finally, Antonio Reynoso, 2017 candidate for City Council District Number 34. 1, failing to disclose a merchant account, $100. 2, failing to provide merchant account statements, $300. 3, failing to demonstrate compliance with cash receipts, reporting, and documentation requirements, $510. 4, failing to report transactions in daily pre-election disclosure statements, $250. 5, accepting over-the-limit contributions, $1,800. 6, accepting contributions from corporations and limited liability companies, $815. 7, accepting contributions from unregistered political committees, $125. 8, failing to demonstrate that spending was in furtherance of the campaign, violation, no penalty. 9, making impermissible post-election expenditures, $849 for total penalties of $4,749. In addition, now I'm going to have to toggle to, hold on one sec. Okay, here we go. In addition, there is a repayment of campaign funds obligation, which is the greater of the current bank account balance, which we think, the last information we had was $1,340.53, or the amount of the overpayment, which I'm going to have to now look from another document unless someone wants to provide it for me. 1 second here.
$1,193.
Thank you very much. $1,193.
Before the board votes,
The banks are $1,193.
I neglected when the chair froze while reciting the numbers for candidate Castro. I neglected to point out that also the board will be voting on a recommendation of breach of certification for that candidate.
Yes, you're right. I omitted that. Thank you. All right, so that is the motion with those proposed findings, penalties, and repayment obligations. I'll make the motion. Is there a second?
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? Abstentions? The motion carries. All right, so that is done. So the next item on our agenda involves dealing with 2 complaints that have been filed. One
Chair,
with
excuse me, this is Richard Davis. I just want to note that I need to depart the meeting.
Okay, thank you very much. Yeah, Amy, would you explain each of these complaints and how we're proposing to deal with them?
The staff is making recommendations on 2 complaints filed against the Maria Castro campaign. The staff is recommending that the board dismiss 1 complaint and find that the 2nd complaint was substantiated in part and dismiss the other part. The parts that were substantiated are reflected in the violations and penalties that the board just voted to assess. Second, the staff is recommending that the board dismiss a complaint against the Marjorie Velasquez campaign for city council in 2017.
All right, I'll make a motion to handle those two complaints as our executive director just explained. Is there a second?
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Abstentions? The motion carries. Finally, we're going to vote on the final rules. Who would like to explain this?
Our general counsel will give a presentation about the rules.
Thank you.
Good morning. It's Hillary Wiseman, the general counsel. On February 13, 2020, the board adopted for public comment several proposed amendments to the rules. The proposed amendments were published in the city record on February 24, 2020, and the board held a public hearing on them March 19, 2020. One individual testified at the hearing, and the board received 2 public comments on the rules. On April 3, 2020, the board published an updated draft of the amendments for a voluntary second public comment period. The board received 1 public comment on the updated rules. CFP staff recommends that the board adopt these amendments to the rules regarding public funds payments and repayments, proof of compliance with the Conflicts of Interest Board, deadlines for submitting certain documents and completing a compliance training, disclosure statements, contribution limits, transfers of funds, qualified expenditures, independent expenditures, special elections, runoff elections, and the voter guide. These amendments are being made to conform to and facilitate implementation of and compliance with amendments made to the Administrative Code of the City of New York and the New York City Charter by Local Laws Number 1 and 128 for the year 2019, amendments made to the City Charter by the 2018 and 2019 Charter Revision Commissions, and amendments made to the New York State Election Law by Section 14 of Chapter 5 of the Laws of 2019 and Section 8 of Chapter 6 of the Laws of 2019. If the board is prepared to take action, the board staff now recommends that the board adopt these proposed additions to the board's rules as final.
I will move the adoption of these proposed rules. Is there a second?
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Abstentions? The motion carries. All right, our final item is to vote to go into executive session, and since there is will be nothing to vote on following it, we will adjourn following the executive session. I'll make that motion. Is there a second?
Second.
All those in favor? Aye. Opposed? Abstentions? Our public meeting now completed. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you.